We're probably going to get started right away. So thank you all for coming to the STEM career panel. We are very happy to have you here today, very excited. We will be talking with our 5 panelists about all of their experience in STEM careers and in STEM fields, and you will have the opportunity to ask them any questions you may have. All right, so before we get started, I do want to explain us. We're hosting the event. We are FRC 7431 Wingspan. So let me explain a little bit more about that. So Wingspan is a FIRST robotics team. FIRST here stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And it's an organization that tries to inspire young people by having us go through programs in which we can build robots, learn more about STEM. So FIRST has 3 flagship programs: FLL, FTC, and FRC. If you heard before, I explained that Wingspan is an FRC team, which means we are a FIRST robotics competition team. But we also call ourselves Viera High Robotics, which is another kind of umbrella term. So let me, first, before we get into Wingspan, there's another umbrella here. Let me explain Viera High Robotics, all right? So here in Viera, Florida, we've got an organization of FIRST teams. Currently, Wingspan is the only one in the organization, but we're in the process of establishing 2 other teams, 2 FLL teams, which are FIRST Lego League teams, one at Endeavor Elementary and the other at Viera Elementary. So we hope to be made up of 3 teams. But to get further into the team that we are made up of right now, which is Wingspan, like I said before, we're a FIRST robotic competition team, which means that every year we work during a 6-week build period where we build a robot to the specifications of the game that we play that year. For example, these pictures over here we have are of last year's robot. Our mission, as it says here, is to build a diverse student-led team where all members can discover their passions and gain experience through hands-on interactive learning. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Wingspan and how you can become part of the team, stick around until the end of the presentation. But for now, we're going to move on to our panelists, the main event.
Great, thank you, Sid. Good introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Barrett Turnoy, joining you from Minnesota, and a little bit about my background. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Supply Chain Management from Iowa State University, and I'm currently working on my MBA online from the University of Iowa. Here in Minnesota, I work for Collins Aerospace, which is a part of the larger company Raytheon Technologies. And in my free time, I help mentor and volunteer with an organization here in Minnesota, but it's a national organization called Technovation. So here in Minnesota, I work in Burnsville for the sensors business of Collins Aerospace. I help as a buyer, so I use my degree to help with electronic and other mechanical components that our manufacturing site needs. So I work with an army of engineers every day, industrial engineers, mechanical engineers, other technology areas. So an average week for me, I will know what kind of parts that we need to get based on how long it takes for them to arrive. And I will work with our engineering teams with anything that I may not completely understand because I'm not the expert of everything, but we have the experts here. So it's really fun for me to work with all of our engineers, and every day is a different kind of day. So that is what keeps me excited. And there's just a ton of opportunities in the aerospace and defense business, even now with everything else going on. So I look forward to the other panel question, and I'll move on to the next panelist.
Hey everyone, my name is Derick Whited. I am a grad student here at Virginia Tech. So my background is that I got a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Iowa State, and then I was accepted to Virginia Tech to do a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering. I am in kind of an interesting situation because I am currently finishing up my degree, but I also have a job lined up for after graduation. And I'll be a space systems engineer at Lockheed Martin in Northern Virginia around DC. So I'll be operating government satellites while they're in orbit. And a cool fact about me is that I just got my first authorship and then my two other co-authorships on papers for conferences in the second half of the year. So while I don't get to travel to Utah and then like Western Montana at a ski resort where the conferences are actually being held, I still get to present and talk about my work. So what I do as a grad student is really just two jobs. So I have a job as a student, just to continue learning and continue taking classes and updating my background knowledge on the subject. And then my other job is as a research assistant, where I perform research for a sponsor that has some end goal. So my backstory on education is that engineering doesn't have to be super specialized, and you can really find it at the intersection of many different fields. So I took a lot of CAD, drawing and physics classes in high school, and then got into it in undergrad with a lot of just fundamental engineering classes like heat transfer, statics and dynamics, so basically structural design. But it's all of the extracurriculars and non-fundamental stuff that I got involved in that really pushed me in the direction that I've gone. So leading a large student design team, basically like what the FRC team is at Viera, but just a bunch of college students with probably a larger budget, and then getting minors in geology and political science, and then just a bunch of different internships. And finally, I moved into graduate school, which is a lot more academically focused and research focused. So now I've taken classes on remote sensing, orbital mechanics, and then I'm finally working on a bunch of machine learning projects. So I went from working with a bunch of physical parts as a mechanical engineer to working with nothing but code and computers now as a graduate student. So it's the underlying point here is that you can approach the field from so many different angles and still find some success.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Whited. Weirdly enough, I look very similar to the previous panelist. So I have a very similar background as Derick from high school through undergraduate. I got a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering at Iowa State as well. If there's a theme going with these panelists, it's usually revolving around the Midwest. After that, though, I decided that I was done with school for the time being, and I wanted to go work in industry a little bit. And most of my skill set in internships during college revolved around working in a manufacturing facility. So a factory, sometimes called a plant. You'll hear me use that term interchangeably. I am currently a manufacturing engineer as a rotational position at Donaldson Company. Donaldson Company makes filtration solutions, I guess you could call them. Everything from the filters and valves on a disk drive to battery valves to aerospace filters and a lot more of air filters for heavy off-road machinery, liquid filters for hydraulic systems, that sort of thing. And kind of as a fun fact, and Derick hinted on this, would be your extracurricular activities at college, or even in high school as well with FRC or a similar team. You can build race cars, and it can be school sanctioned. It's pretty awesome. I don't have a normal headshot, but I do have one in a race car that a group of us actually designed and built, and I got to lead the team on. So it's definitely beyond just classroom work out there to really understand or have a better understanding of a STEM field. And my role at Donaldson, or rather as a manufacturing engineer, because that's a really broad term in and of itself, my goal is to make manufacturing plants safer, more environmentally friendly, and making the product in the most efficient way possible. So being able to make something with less money and less time, so that way it can reach a customer quicker and we can realize a better profit. So this definition kind of varies company to company, just like every engineering discipline. Sometimes they'll be called industrial engineers if they're more on the labor and worker side of that, and sometimes they're going to be called mechanical or manufacturing engineers if we're designing things like tooling or fixtures inside the factory. And I work routinely with people like Barrett to make sure that we purchase the right products, everything works together, and we can actually make that product. And in addition to that, my role is actually rotational. So I am actually on my third of 3 year-long rotations. I was previously in Kentucky 2 years ago. Last year I lived in Indianapolis area in Indiana, and now I'm in Wisconsin. So I've moved around a lot. The best kind of extracurricular activities you can say I have outside of work is working with FRC teams and mentoring them. So in each of those locations, I've had the opportunity to do that. So an average day or week for me is pretty varied. We do have some long-term projects, like I just got done today with figuring out how we're going to reorganize the entire factory while we're still making that product. But a lot of times my day-to-day is going to be a lot more based on what a particular production line machine worker needs, whether that's for safety, for comfort, for making better product. And that means I'm assisting with troubleshooting and machine breakdowns. I'm working through poor quality if we make a bad product. And I am definitely obsessing over worker safety. That is the number one thing. And you've noticed I've said safety about 10 times. That's something that we focus on manufacturing probably more than anything else. So that's really my day to day.
Right. Hello, my name is Melanie, and I am currently a third-year dental student. But first, I also went to Iowa State, just like the other panelists. So I got a bachelor's of science in chemistry, and then I also double majored in Spanish, and then I also have a business minor, all from Iowa State. Like I said, I'm currently a third-year dental student at the University of Iowa, and that is a 4-year program, so I will graduate in a little more than a year and a half. And one of the reasons why I actually got into this is because I had a lot of dental work when I was younger. So my mouth and my teeth did not look great, and I actually had 8 teeth pulled. And then I got braces after, and you would never know looking at my mouth now what it looked like before, but it was a huge change. And so just to kind of see that, you know, wow, I could do this for other people, that was really what started to get me interested in it. So like I said, right now I'm a student, and then in about a year and a half, I will be a full-blown dentist. So on a basic level, this just, I mean, it means that I'll be able to help teach people how to keep healthy mouths. And this is going to depend on every person where they're at. So for some people, this means, you know, maybe they don't have teeth. So maybe it's keeping their gums and their tongue healthy and giving them dentures so they can actually chew their food. For other people, it might be they have a lot of cavities, so teaching them what they can do differently to help prevent that. Some people have a lot of pain. And so it's individualized and teaching people how to manage their own health. So hopefully they can, have their teeth for a long time and stay healthy. I also learned that there are many paths. When I got into dental school, I thought you become a dentist. And I quickly learned that there are many different options even after you graduate. So there are community health centers. You can go into private practice. Similar to community health centers, there are Indian health services where you actually are practicing on reservations. You can be in a corporate office where there are tons of dentists right with you. Or, in private practice, you could be the only dentist, or you could have a few dentists with you. So, and that's even just in the dental realm. If I wanted to, after these 4 years, I could also specialize. So if some of you have had braces, an orthodontist, it goes to 4 years of dental school, and then they go to 2 additional years of orthodontic school. And so there are, I want to say 12 different specialties now. And so those are all also options after dental school. Right now, since I am in my 3rd year, I am in clinics and I am seeing patients. So just today I was working on a denture, creating a denture, but I also do fillings. I'll be doing fillings tomorrow, doing root canals, cleanings, and even things like implants. And I realized that just for a visual, something kind of cool. So we actually, a lot of stuff is hands-on in dentistry. So these are called casts, and we we make these pretty much of every person, and it's to evaluate how people bite, if it's giving them pain, and how we can create the crown or the implant to fit their mouth the way that they need.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Kori Bowns. I have a Bachelor of Science in Physics Education and a Master of Science Education, both from Illinois Institute of Technology, another Midwestern area university. The cool thing about my bachelor program was that it was essentially a full physics degree, just like a Bachelor of Science in Physics, with an additional year or so of coursework along the way that added all of the education requirements for receiving a certification in secondary education in the state of Illinois. I'm currently a science teacher at a southwestern suburban Chicago school, Argo Community High School. And I am a First Tech Challenge mentor. That's one of those programs that Sid talked about earlier, at Benito Juarez Community Academy, which is the school that I student taught at while I was in college. I did a lot of extracurriculars along the way. I myself was part of a FIRST robotics team when I was in high school, and I continue to mentor and volunteer today. But a fun thing that's a little bit out of the ordinary for someone who was so science focused in college is that I was editor-in-chief of my university's student newspaper. It was a lot of fun. It was a really good creative outlet, and it taught me a lot of skills that I maybe didn't know I would use at the time, but now I use like every week, especially in the era of remote learning how to use like Adobe Illustrator and Premiere Pro has been super, super helpful. So it's a little bit of an introduction about me. I currently am a science teacher, so this year I'm teaching 2 courses to 9th grade students. I teach kind of a standard physics course. At my school we do physics first, so we teach it to freshmen, and it's really, really fun. And then this year I just started designing and am implementing a physics with robotics class. So we're studying things that you might study in a physics class, like one-dimensional kinematic motion, forces, electricity, that kind of thing, but doing it through the venue of a robot and some programming, which has been really, really fun. After school, I work with a First Tech Challenge team at a school where I student taught. Working with those students, I primarily focus on student leadership, presentation skills, and engineering documentation, kind of communicating the science and engineering principles behind what they're building so that they can communicate it to their community, to their classmates, and to their judges at competitions, which is really fun. I really really appreciated being included in this STEM career panel as a science teacher. It's not really a STEM career you think about very frequently, but I use science, technology, engineering, and math literally every single day as a physics teacher and as a robotics teacher. Unlike most of the other careers on this panel, a lot of you who are watching, you know what a teacher does from day to day. You've been seeing it for 13 to 18 years. So on an average day, I do most of the things that you probably imagine a science teacher doing. These days, a lot more talking into my webcam and sitting at my kitchen table, but it's been a lot of fun. My favorite part of my job as a science teacher is building authentic science experiences into curriculum. A really big part of my university training is about like what science is, not necessarily studying physics or biology or chemistry, but what is science? How do we know what we know? And I love building that stuff into labs and discussions in my classes and kind of seeing how we see scientific processes happening everywhere and how it affects not just scientists, but everybody's lives one way or another. I'm constantly using skills from my formal physics background, from my formal education background, and a few other special experiences along the way. One of my favorite hobbies is at robotics competitions like the one that this FRC team competes at. I'm usually a play-by-play sportscaster, which is like the most fun thing in the world. So I use a lot of my physics knowledge, my engineering knowledge, and use that to describe to our crowd and live streams what is happening. And I also had a college internship where I did demonstrations at Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry, which is the largest science museum in the Western Hemisphere. And my job there was literally to do cool things like dissect cow eyeballs and teach people about it, or explode hydrogen and oxygen balloons and talk about chemical reactions. So a lot of different fun science things going into my career today.
All right, that was fantastic. Thank you. I'd like to thank each of you for doing your introductions. We are now moving on to the Q&A portion of the event. We did get some questions in advance, so we'll start with those. And if any of you who are watching happen to have any questions after hearing all of that information, pop them into the chat. We'll get to them as soon as possible. All right, okay. So now that we can see everybody here, our first question is going to be, what's a mistake or a bad decision that you've made?
So for me, a mistake that I've made, and repeatedly, something that's very difficult to learn, is not talking to my teachers and professors when I had a question, which is kind of a hallmark for pretty much every college student and even high school students. But yeah, especially in those big lecture classes when you have 200 other people, it's very difficult to raise your hand and ask the question that is burning inside you, which is funny because probably most people have that question. So yeah, big mistake there, because you don't get to know your professors as well that way. And if you don't go to office hours or ask questions outside of class, that's another way you don't get to know them. And by not knowing them, you miss out on all the opportunities that knowing them would give you. So maybe extra research opportunities or job opportunities, or even just friends that you get to meet by knowing them. That's not taking advantage of that can really hurt you.
Definitely, definitely. Did anybody else have an answer that they would like to provide to this question? All right, well then the next question will be, what extracurriculars or opportunities helped you in advancing your career?
All right, and I'll go first with that one. So I would say I was all over the map when I had jobs when I was younger. I actually started detasseling, which a lot of you students probably don't know what that is because it's a Midwest thing. But I did that when I was 14. And then after that, I worked at the pool for 3 years. And so that's kind of where it all started. And I think showing that consistency that I was at the pool for 3 years helped me in college get my first research position. And then once you get your first research position, you can see something else that you like. And so I actually, I was in a few different departments for research, and it actually, none of them were in chemistry, and that's okay. They were still in the sciences. I actually was in the biochem department, and then I went to agronomy. But I felt that that helped just show that I could be independent. Those summers that I did research were really formative for me, just because it really helped helped me with critical thinking, be able to formulate questions and an approach of how to solve these things. So I guess from an outside perspective, that's what I feel that other people saw from me being in research. Now, I mentioned that I got a business minor as well. So I, partway through my college career, I actually thought that I was going to go as a business major. And so I ended up taking a marketing internship after my junior year. So it was quite a bit different than the research that I had been doing before. And that was a tough thing to get into, to show that, you know, why were you doing research and now you want to do something business? But I really do think that that marketing internship that I got that summer was really formative, at least for my dental school application, to show that I was looking, I guess, at a broader horizon and not just at one thing.
All right, that was very thorough answer. Thank you.
Sorry, maybe too thorough.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, actually. We have another question.
I have that question as well, actually, Sid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just to add on to Melanie, I also worked in a cornfield for my high school. It's not as weird as you think if you live in Iowa, but I was in pollination, which is not that much different. Regardless, that didn't have any effect on my career path, but I can tell you that having a really wide variety of extracurriculars and additional knowledge bases to pull from can also be helpful. I did 2 internships during college, both of which were manufacturing engineering related. So I was constantly in a factory working as an engineer in support, mostly in aerospace. So I have an understanding of the high quality, high precision that's required for that manufacturing. But in reality, the things that help me the most don't actually relate directly to my career now. Those 2 things were, first, SAE International, which is a student organization at Iowa State. That's where you build race cars, actually. So where Derick had mentioned he was leading a team, he was leading a team of engineers to build one vehicle. I was actually over the entire organization that had 5 of those teams and roughly 200 students. So instead of being an engineer for that, I was actually in charge of coordinating things like training for our shop, making sure everybody got to where they needed to go safely, balancing budgets, that sort of thing. So all that administrative work, understanding how that goes on behind the scenes of running an engineering organization has actually helped me a lot. And it's also provided a number of leadership tests and maybe even misfires and fails that I've been able to learn from before I jump into the real world past education. The other opportunity that I had was actually to take a minor in international studies, which has absolutely nothing to do with engineering. And in that, I decided that I was going to learn Russian. Russian's a really hard language. It's not at all like English. It's not a Latin-based language. It has a completely different alphabet. So this type of challenge makes you think completely differently than a STEM-related question. You have to learn a language in a different way than you learn math, science, any of that material. So having that type of challenge and then being able to go apply it and study abroad definitely widened my horizons a little bit, understood what other people in other cultures have to go through to come to the United States or even just work in where they live. And then on top of that, learning something that is beyond just STEM can help you balance out your skill set, makes you more multidisciplinary, and that's always important too.
Wow, thank you. I know that somebody else also wanted to answer this question.
I just offered to answer a little bit. I know I spoke a lot about a lot of my extracurricular experiences and some opportunities I had, but one of the more interesting things that led to where I am now, kind of developing robotics coursework and still teaching physics, a lot of that comes from my participation on a first team while I was in high school. While doing that, one of my mentors was he worked at Boeing, and he knew I liked science and he knew I liked math, but I had no idea what I wanted to do with that. And he was a really good resource. He majored in physics in college, and he talked to me about he's like, yeah, I work on programming. That's what I do. It's not exactly what I studied, but people who study science, especially physics and engineering as well, they learn how to solve problems. And if you can do that in your coursework or in your extracurriculars, that's a super valuable thing, no matter what field you want to go into. That ability to break down a problem and dissect it is a really important thing that you definitely can get in the classroom, but you also get it a lot in any extracurricular you're doing, because usually it's working with other people a lot more. It's doing things that don't just relate to you, your grade, and your class. You have a lot more to consider. And then my first job offer out of college was actually at a school leading their first robotics competition team. And I definitely would not have gotten that job offer if I did not have the background that I had. And it was a really fun experience, and it let me try a lot of new things. So it was a really, really good time to have that background.
Those were some very good answers. Thank all of you. Our next question. Our next question is, when you were trying to decide where to go after high school, how did you choose the school that you attended?
So this was the runner-up for bad mistakes that I've made. But the bad mistake that I made in this case was not doing that, not shopping around, not looking at and comparing different schools, at least for undergrad. So I got this experience firsthand, first time when I was looking at grad schools, and I already had in my mind what I liked and disliked about Iowa State, and started to look for that stuff in other schools. So what I would recommend looking at is just finding a school that will give you a lot of opportunities, because there's no way when you graduate high school that especially if you're going to college with a very diverse field set and everything, there's no way what you're going to do or what you're going to enjoy or want to do. So I went in knowing I wanted to be an engineer, but I first started thinking, like green technology or power generation seems cool. I took a few classes for a minor in natural resource economics and realized I really didn't enjoy that. And I've just jumped around since then. I added 2 minors in 2 very different fields, and then got involved in a bunch of different clubs that gave me a bunch of different opportunities. So finding a school that gives you just a lot of avenues for going down and testing who you are is really, really important. More important than finding the right dining center, I'll say that. Or the cheapest.
Awesome. Okay. That was some really good advice there. Our next question in the chat is, okay, although some of you mentioned that there are multiple ways to approach the STEM fields, what kind of classes do you recommend students should take in high school in order to work towards an aerospace engineering career?
Okay, not to take, yeah, okay, I'll take this one too. So it's really even in undergrad, you're still taking all of your foundational courses. So really you want a good base in physics and other science disciplines, and math especially, before you jump into the really nitty-gritty of engineering. I would, based on personal experience, I would recommend taking classes that you enjoy doing, first of all, but then also taking a higher level math class and a physics class at the very least. I took 4 years of drawing, so like art classes, and I found that to be really informative on how I approach engineering and especially design work later in life. But you know, if your school has a wood shop or something that kind of forces you to work with your hands, I highly recommend that too. So just take classes that you enjoy, but also try and fill that in with the, you know, physics and math, and you should be good.
Great, thank you. Next question. What do you like most about your job? And then what do you like least? 2 questions in one. Who would like to answer this one?
I think I volunteered. So I do like a couple things about my job. First, I do get to move around. I've gotten to see some rather interesting places. And I'll leave it at interesting just because there's always some good and some bad with wherever you live. Kentucky was great for food. I live near Lexington, so there was a lot of different opportunities there that is not a Midwestern city at all. Moving up here to Wisconsin, I got to get back kind of to my small town, hometown feel, living in a smaller area while still enjoying all the outdoors. So that's one thing that I enjoy. The other is that as a rotate, I kind of get a special, we'll call it a privilege, where I have high visibility with some of the leaders in our company. So the VP of Ops or Operations, who runs all of our manufacturing plants worldwide, my paycheck comes directly out of his budget, so he knows what I do. That gives me some leverage, and it also gives me some exposure to people that are the best in their game in our company, to learn from, to mentor from, that sort of activity as well. So it's a lot of learning all at once. Some days you'll go to work and it doesn't feel like you get much done because you're constantly fighting fires on the floor. But then some days it feels like my brain is too full with information that I just learned for the first time, because I didn't go to school to be a manufacturing engineer. I went to school to be a mechanical engineer. So learning things about manufacturing has all been on the job since I graduated. That's definitely been something that I've enjoyed a lot, picking up that new information. I'd say the least, I said that I worked for a filter company. Ever since I was little, and I guess this kind of answers another question that was supposed to be coming up, I wanted to work on something that made it to the cover of Popular Mechanics or Popular Science. Filters don't do that. It's not an exciting product to make sometimes. It doesn't mean it's not fulfilling. It just means that I don't wake up every morning and say, yes, I get to make filters. So it can be a little bit of a pull sometimes to be like, oh, you know, other companies look really cool, really fun to work with, but ultimately I have a lot of foundational learning with Donaldson. So I guess you take it as it comes.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Who else was going to answer this question?
I also volunteered for it. So one of my favorite things that I haven't really mentioned yet about teaching in science is the amount of creativity I get to have. And I think as a student, you don't really see a lot, you don't notice a lot of that until you're on the other side of the room. So I do love, you know, if I'm like, okay, today we're going to teach about the direction of acceleration. There are a million different ways that I can approach that, and I really do enjoy that creative process, and I like making things. So that's probably one of my favorite parts, is just the creative aspect, both of science, which is a really creative field, again, something that a lot of times you don't think about until you're doing it. A lot of creativity going into science, and then also into designing instructional materials. And then I did think of a least favorite. I was really struggling. For me, I'm not a super extroverted person, despite my comfort in speaking. At the end of the day of talking to like 135 high schoolers, I just want to crawl on the couch and just like lay down and recharge. So that's probably the hardest thing. It's not a negative, but it's the hardest part for me, is just the exhaustion some days. But it means I had a good day and talked to a lot of people. So
Yeah, I totally get that. Barrett, I also know that you wanted to answer this question.
Sure. So when, there's a lot of things that I like about this position with Collins Aerospace, a part of Raytheon. It's so large that while I'm doing a particular job that affects the thing that's behind me, whether it's the wipers or the sensors that help the pilots know exactly where the plane's going, what angle it's going, how fast it's going, if there's ice on the outside of the airplane. I started in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I went over to Burnsville because I wanted a different product portfolio mix, and I wanted to learn something different. So I really enjoy with my organization that it's global, and there's so many different things that I can work with, so many different people, products, and it's really motivating to see what some of them do. And on the other aspect, some of the products just are in the bathroom, but you want the bathroom to work well. So it keeps me motivated on what I'm able to do, whether it's for the pilot or anyone that's in an aircraft, whether it's a commercial product or if it's military. It's been fun to work on them all.
For sharing. Looking at our list of questions here, new question. For someone wanting to go into a more specified field, like working with the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, what kind of school specifications and connections would you say were best fit?
I know I have some undergraduate physics experience. I don't know how solely physics everybody else's experience was. Unfortunately, that is not my particular branch that I'm super into, but so far as like finding a physics program that's a good fit for you, one thing I really loved about Illinois Institute of Technology's program was that it was quite a small program. I think there were 19 in my incoming class. IIT is a very big engineering school, so the sciences are pretty niche. I really enjoyed that, and I had a lot of professors who worked at the national laboratories. Chicago, conveniently, is located very close to two national labs, Argonne National Laboratory and Fermi National Laboratory. And as part of my first class at the university, which a lot of physics departments have awesome things, so look into those near you, but one of my favorite parts about our first physics course, Physics 100 at Illinois Tech, is they got us into both of those labs to see what was happening day to day. So I'd super recommend getting into places where science is happening, not just studying science on paper and in books, and making connections with people who are doing that real science. A lot of my faculty were working and doing research at Argonne and Fermi, which was a really good experience to talk with them. And as a result of that, there was a lot of really good undergraduate research experience opportunities. So that's kind of something I would look into, getting undergraduate research before you build out your education further. But that's all I have on that note. Not a super expert into that branch.
Even so, thank you for your answer. Really appreciate it. Here we go. We have another question. How much time does your job take up? Do you still have free time?
I'll start. So there's a lot of jokes and memes. I'm part of I belong to a Facebook grad school memes page, but most of the jokes are related to not having free time, which is true because almost 100% of your work is dictated by yourself, at least on the engineering side. So my work expands to fill however long I'm awake every day. I can work on it as long as I want or as short as I want, and then the deadlines are what actually is where I have to deliver something. So it's not too much different than working on homework, except this homework just like adds to itself. It continues to grow. Despite that, I managed to find a lot of free time to do stuff. And this is really, really important, especially if that's your focus in school, is to take free time or make time to do something that's not related to your field, or just like mental recharge time. Self-care is really, really important, and it becomes more and more important the more complex your job gets and the more time it takes up. So I go rock climbing, cycling, running, basically anything outside while it's nice and warm outside right now, to take advantage and like get away from sitting right here working on stuff. The other interesting part is that I'm not well set up for my job after grad school either, because I am going to be in space operations, which is shift work. So the shifts that I'll be working are 12-hour long shifts, where every month you go in and you do like 4 days, 12 hours each day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then you have like 4 days off, and then 3 days on, 3 days off until the end of the month. And at the end of that month, you switch from day shift to night shift. So 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So my free time is going to be a lot, because I'll get a 4-day weekend every once in a while, but it may not be at the times when the sun is up.
Yeah, definitely sounds like a difficult balance.
Barrett.
Ooh.
It would probably be good if somebody else answered that, who has like a normal 9-to-5 job, because like that's a really sad story.
Well, I know that you wanted to answer this question, Barrett.
Sure. Well, I have kind of more of a normal schedule now. In my current position, I did work for Amazon before, so I was doing those 12s and nights, and that was crazy. But currently, I'm able to start at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I can walk away from my computer here in my apartment at like 3:30 in the afternoon, and that's okay. Of course, there's more work if I wanted to do it. Today, I was communicating with people in Mexico, India, and across the country, and that's kind of like a normal day. So depending on when other people are up is when I want to be up too, which is why I start a little bit earlier in the day. And overall, it's something in this current position where I can still study after work. I usually have time, and I'm actually able to take some study time each week from the company as well, and that's paid, which is nice. So in this position, it's a lot more flexible, but all positions I've had have not been like this. So if you don't start in the first position that gives you the work-life balance that you want, there are other opportunities out there, and you can make the job what you want the more that you keep trying. So don't be concerned if the first internship, first job, first thing you're doing isn't your favorite. There's always more to keep trying.
Awesome. Thank you both. Okay, our next question. What advice would you give to someone wanting to enter your field?
I had this one. So the big thing with manufacturing engineering isn't actually the engineering, it's the questioning. A lot of industrial engineers, which is a similar field to what I'm in, are taught what's called the 5 whys. That's a problem solving method. Basically, you ask why to a problem 5+ times, and every time you get a different answer, you continue asking why till you get to the root cause. Probably 40 to 50% of my communication with everybody per day is asking a supervisor or a worker, why? Why are you doing that? Why are we moving pallets around in the factory 3 times a day? Why do we have to have racking everywhere? Why do we have this much inventory? That type of question is really what gets you into, I'd say, any science for sure. But in particular, from my experience, manufacturing requires it, because you're not dealing with a mechanical or computer system, you're dealing with a human system, and human systems make errors a lot. Everything is done, with most manufacturers, everything is done by a human clicking a button, making a decision to purchase that part or schedule it here or there, or make that part the way that they want to make it. So by asking those questions, you'll actually get down to what the root cause of an issue is, and you can fix it a lot easier. In addition to that, just be curious. That kind of goes along with asking questions. I get myself into a lot of, we'll call it trouble at work, because I will continually ask those types of questions and get into projects that I was never originally supposed to be on, and get involved with all kinds of interesting stuff that kind of jumps off of what my original task was in the plant. So that can get you a long ways, just asking those questions, getting involved where you think you might be interested, regardless of what's keeping you there. The rules aren't made for most people. You can jump out of your box anytime and go chase something down, and really explore different avenues to either solve a problem or explore different problems too.
Fantastic. I know that Derick, you also wanted to answer the question.
That was literally the answer that I was going to give. He got it. Like, you just gotta like stay curious and always be on the lookout for something that you can learn. So it's a really cliche phrase, but not being the smartest person in the room is a very true statement. And if you are the smartest person in the room, you do need to go find a new room. You're not in a place that's going to promote your growth further, if that's the case. So being the expert is great, but like you want to know of another expert that you go to, at least for now, until you get to the peak or whatever. But yeah, just trying to learn constantly and always be a student, and really embracing that is very, very important.
Thank you.
I can also add something for a little different realm. So if you're looking to go into anything healthcare, I would say go shadow somebody. I know that's probably not as easy to do if you're looking at engineering or anything like that. But if you're wanting to be a dentist, go shadow a dentist. If you want to be a medical doctor, go shadow a medical doctor, because you might have in your head, what you think they do, and then what they actually do, their day looks completely different. And then in addition to that, every person that I have shadowed has absolutely loved answering any questions that I had, and they want to help you along the way. And those connections are so important. So it's very cliche, but it's true. It's not all what you know, but it's who you know. And so I'm going to say most, if not all, additional school, you're going to need references. And if you and if you have shadowed people and you have shown your curiosity and you have shown professionalism and you actually show that like this is what I want, and people can see who you are as a person, that will take you a lot further than a certain GPA will.
Thank you for your answers, all of you. We have a few more questions left before we start wrapping up. Our next question is, when did you realize what you wanted to do?
I know that I volunteered for that one. I do want to shout out Melanie's answer there, though, because when I was a freshman in high school, we had to do a job shadow, and I job shadowed a veterinarian, and I very much changed my decision about wanting to be a veterinarian. It was really, really cool, but it wasn't necessarily what I thought it was. So the job shadow experience, super, really good idea. When it comes to realizing what I wanted to do, it was probably toward the end of when I was in high school. One experience I always think about when I think about becoming a science educator is my first robotics team, which was a high school team. We went to an elementary school and we just like drove around our robot. We showed what it can do. I don't even remember what it did that year. That's not the important part. The important part was a bunch of 5 and 6 year olds just in awe of this thing that I helped build. And I was kind of leading the discussion, asking questions, answering questions, interacting with the students. And there were staff from our district there, and they took a bunch of pictures. And my mentor, who was one of the IT professionals at my high school, like the day after, he emailed me saying, hey, we got all this really great feedback. Here are some pictures. Everyone said you did such an awesome job. You should think of becoming a teacher. And I still have that email. And he sent it in like June of 2011. So it worked out okay.
Awesome, thank you.
I was going to take this one too. So I was a big nerd when I was little. Both parents are engineers. So growing up with 2 engineering parents, you end up kind of wanting to be an engineer. So from a very early age, like 2nd grade or something, I wanted to be an engineer. the thing that got lost along the way, though, is what I was really passionate about within engineering. Being an engineer is one thing because you have that mentality of constant improvement and leveraging the scientific method for like finding ways to apply technology and science. But the real key is that I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, if not an astronaut. And it took until I was a junior in college to really realize that, because a friend and I were talking about what did you want to be when you grow up, or you grew up, and I said an astronaut, and she asked me, well, why aren't you working towards that right now? And I didn't have a good answer for that, and I realized that, yeah, no, that really is what I want to do again. So I went from this very defined goal when I was like 3 feet tall to losing that over the course of a long education, and then finally finding that again right in time to apply for schools very, very late.
I see. That was a very good answer for both of you. Thank you. Lastly, do any of you have any advice or any last words that you wanted to say?
I have something. It actually relates to the previous question in that I still don't know what I want to do. That's a normal thing. The vast majority of people don't have their mind made up about what they want to do until college or after college. I have a lot of friends who pivoted from being one type of engineer to being a different type of engineer within 1 year of graduating. So they actually quit their job and went and got a different job. Now, obviously, that takes some economic headwinds, and it takes a little bit of leveraging the skills that you have to be able to do that. But you're not alone if you don't know what to do, even after college. And the main advice that I can give then is to make sure that you are using your skill set, if you want to be in STEM, using your skill set of asking those questions, making those connections, and constantly moving in a direction that you want to be. You don't have to be there the next week or the next month or the next year. I know that we have, or at least me personally, seen success or seen successful people on social media, in the news all the time. That gives you a perception that everybody has it all figured out. And that could not be farther from the truth. I have people, co-workers at work who are 5 years from retiring, who are still thinking of possibly pivoting their careers for like a second or third time. So it's not this existential crisis that you need to have getting into college, going through college, or even leaving college to know exactly what you want. Just have a direction and start moving in that direction.
If I can say a couple last words as well, that's great. And to echo that, I started out as an industrial engineering major at Iowa State, and I literally failed my first engineering class to realize that maybe that's not the route for me. So go into First Robotics if your school has it. Mentor with someone that you think is in the field that you want to go into. Try as many things as you can, and in the end, I'm still working in an engineering related field, and I'm making the thing that's behind me, I keep planes flying. Now there's a lot of other people doing that, so don't be afraid because I failed my engineering class, but you can keep going with what motivates you, even if the first way that you're trying it doesn't work out the way you thought it would.
And to add to that, always invest time in your passions. Even if it doesn't seem perfectly related to what you're doing, there may be a time down the road where getting into music or getting into, okay, I have really bad examples, but getting into geology, because I'm a rock nerd as well, has helped me a lot because that has kind of pushed me into where I'm headed. So just watering your passions a little bit and doing that alongside whatever schooling you're in can really, really help you out later down the road. Plus, you may make really good friends doing stuff like that that you never would have met otherwise.
Awesome. Anyone else? Well, alrighty then. Okay. So it is 7 o'clock, but before we end, I did want to talk a little bit more about our first robotics team that we have here, Wingspan. I did mention at the beginning of the presentation that if you were interested in Wingspan, we would talk a little bit more about it at the end, and here we are. So our team has 4 units: finance, manufacturing, operations, and technology. And a lot of people, when they think about a robotics team, they think we only really make the robot, but if you see here, that's only half of what we do. We have people who work on the budget, we have people who plan outreach events, we have people who plan panels, just like this one. I am actually the chief of operations. We are looking for new members in every single one of our groups. We're looking for new members to help us build the robot, new members to help us program the robot, new members to help us with our budget, with our sponsors, new members to help us just go to competition, which is something that we hope will happen. We are unsure of what's going, we're unsure because of COVID right now. But in future years, especially, like if you're a freshman, hopefully you'll be able to go to competition. If you'd like to join us, or if you're even just a little bit interested, please email Mr. Formanek, who is our head coach and mentor. His email is formanek.david@brevardschools.org. And I will leave this slide up for a little bit, so anyone who wants to take this information down can take it down. Alrighty. So moving on to the next slide. If you are interested in Wingspan, some upcoming events that we are having. Next week, we'll be hosting a first alumni panel, which is very similar to this panel. Everyone who's a member of that panel would have been on a first team, and they're going to talk a little bit more about how being a member of a first team really impacted their experience in their jobs. And not necessarily, they don't necessarily have STEM jobs either. After that, during October, we'll be having a diversity, equity, and inclusion conference. Instead of through Zoom, we'll stream it through Twitch. If you'd like to learn more about either of these events, you can look at our social media pages, or again, you can contact Mr. Formanek. But otherwise, that's all we have for today. I'd like to thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you being here, and we hope that you learned something from all of our panelists. They have some amazing information to share.